The first thing I smelled when I returned to that day was cheap perfume and damp concrete. Then the pink slip dress hit me. It slid down my cheek like a wet accusation and landed at my feet on the corridor outside our apartment. The cow stood 2 steps below me, hair curling from sweat, one hand gripping the banister and the other pointing so hard at, "You shameless little fox," she screamed. Still in school and already trying to crawl into my son's bed. Do you want to ruin him before the exam? Neighbors were already opening their doors. Faces appeared in narrow slices of someone hissed for someone else to come. See? Someone laughed. Someone said, "I knew that girl read too many novels." My heart punched against my ribs hard enough to hurt. Not from in my previous life, this scene had been the first stone. The lie in the stairwell became gossip in the building. The gossip became humiliation at school. The humiliation became pressure on my parents. And all of it fed the fragile vanity of a boy named Ren Yicheng and the suffocating ambition of his mother until on the night college scores came out, she poured gasoline through our front doorway and burned my family alive. I had smelled the same cheap perfume then, too, even through the smoke. Now I stood in the same stairwell at 17 with the pink dress against my shoe and a second chance so sharp it. Ren Yicheng was there, of course. He stood behind his mother in a white school jacket, mouth tight, eyes fixed on mine with that same cowardly pleading that in my last life he had texted me while his mother screamed at me in public. "Please, help me this once. You owe me. I saved you." No one had told me yet that the drowning he saved me from began with his own hands shoving my shoulder for a joke near. No one had told me that gratitude can be manufactured as neatly as evidence. This time, my phone buzzed in my pocket right on. I already knew the words. I looked down at the dress, then up at the woman spitting fury in the stale hallway, then at the boy waiting for me to swallow, and I said very clearly, "That is not mine." Everything stopped for half a second. Mrs. Kiao blinked as if the script. Ren Yicheng's expression changed. Faster first surprise, then alarm, then irritation at my refusal to cooperate. I bent, pinched the strap of the dress between 2 fingers and held it away from my body as though it were a dead animal. I said, I repeated, "This is not mine." The neighbors leaned farther into the corridor. Old men in undershirts, aunties, a girl from the second floor filming shamelessly through the gap in her door. Mrs. Kiao recovered first because women like her do not survive long without learning to weaponize embarrassment. She slapped. "If it is not yours, whose is it? My son does not bring girls home. Everyone knows. He only studies. He is preparing for North. You think I do not know your kind? Good. Grades on the outside, rotten thoughts on the inside." I should have been shaking. My mother had stood inside our doorway, wringing the hem of her apron. My father had returned from a late repair shift just in time to hear his daughter being called a cheap little seductress in. This time I let Mrs. Kiao scream until she ran out of breath. Then I asked, "If you are so sure, should we call the building manager to check the cameras that landed?" There were cameras in the entryway, the elevator, and the outer stair. Not enough to see everything, but enough to measure. Enough to establish that every school day. I arrived home at precisely 10:30. After evening study hall, with one of my Mrs. Kiao opened her mouth, but I went on. My school card logs every entry and exit. The late study attendance system records. Ask the guard at the gate. Ask the convenience store owner downstairs who sees me buy milk on Tuesdays. Ask anyone who pays attention instead of inventing stories. Someone behind her muttered, "That is true. The girl always comes back with her father." After evening study, another voice joined, in bolder now that doubt existed, and her exam scores are not exactly the scores of someone sneaking around in silk. Ren Yicheng finally stepped. "Mom, let us go inside." He wanted to contain the damage. He wanted witnesses reduced. He wanted the lie to become a family misunderstanding instead of a public allegation. I smiled at him for the first. "Let us keep speaking right here. Since your mother came to my door, let her finish in front of everyone." His face, that was the first time I understood how much power there is in refusing the role assigned to you. In my previous life, I had made the mistake frightened girls always make. I tried to preserve peace for people who I allowed ambiguity because I feared conflict would hurt my parents more than silence. I treated Ren Yicheng's discomfort as if it carried equal moral weight to my humiliation. I thought if I bore it well enough, the adults would notice the imbalance and correct it. Instead, they let it settle. His classmates decided I was ridiculous. My parents tried to keep their heads down and were punished for it anyway. Kiao found a reason to blame me for her. Sin's moods or scores, she returned like, weather, loud, exhausting, impossible to sue, because technically she was just worried. By the time exam season arrived, even kindness felt. A teacher offering extra practice papers sounded pitying. A classmate asking to borrow notes sounded mocking. My world narrowed to surviving the next scene, the next accusation, the next apology. Ren Yicheng would half whisper. Then the scores came. He should have scored high enough for North Capital. He scored barely over 300. Mrs. People later called it madness, as if grief and cruelty had accidentally shaken hands. I never liked that explanation. She bought gasoline. She waited until the building quieted. She wedged our apartment, door shut from outside. I woke to smoke so thick it felt solid and my mother's hands beating at my shoulder. I remember my father kicking the window, bars until the skin split across his ankle. I remember heat. I remember my mother shoving me toward the bathroom with a wet towel and saying my name over and over like names could turn. I died before the fire brigade reached the 4th floor. And then I opened my eyes in the stairwell, again with a pink dress at my feet and a second chance so sharp it almost felt. Kiao accused me. I cataloged her, breathing fast, theatrical, real enough to show she would worked herself up beyond. Ren Yicheng's shoulders tight, one foot already angled toward retreat. The neighbors curious, undecided, useful. My mother, one room away behind the half-open front door, hearing every word. This time I would not ask anyone to save. This time I would make the scene itself work for me. The building manager did come, not because Mrs. Chow wanted him to, but because Uncle Meng from 4B got tired of the noise and called downstairs himself. He arrived with his ring of keys, his suspicion of everyone, and the small authority that comes from controlling.
What is this? He barked.
Mrs. Kiao swung the dress at him as if fabric were proof. This girl is seducing my son. She left this in our house, I answered. Before he could, please check the camera from last night and the door records from my school. Uncle Meng squinted at me, then at her.
That can be done.
It was not done. Immediately, of course. Nothing in our district ever was. But the possibility, more importantly, it gave everyone else permission to doubt aloud. A retired teacher from downstairs said she had seen me come home every evening with a stack of test papers thick enough to choke. The security guard passing by on his scooter confirmed he checked IDs at the school gate every night and knew my face. A woman whose daughter I had tutored in math last winter said that child barely looks up from her notes long enough to. If she had time for scandals, my own girl would have copied them already. Laughter. This time not at me. Mrs. Kiao's mouth pinched into a shape I knew. Well, from my previous life, the expression she wore when the room stopped behaving. Ren Yicheng pulled at her sleeve. Mom, enough. But she could not let go. Not yet. Women who center their sons the way she did treat public embarrassment like bodily injury. She turned toward me again and hissed. Even if the dress is not yours, do not think I do not know what kind of thoughts. You have followed Yicheng around since childhood. There it was.
Not evidence.
Narrative. I looked straight at him. Is that what you think too? He should have answered then. He should have said no. He should have told the truth about the dress being his girlfriend's, about his own lies, about the fact that whatever childish closeness once existed between us had become mostly habit and neighborhood. Instead, he said nothing. Some silences are louder than perjury. I nodded once as if something I had already known had simply. Then I stepped backward into my own doorway, put a hand on the frame and said, from now on, neither of you come to my family's door. Again, without proof in your hands and shame on your face. My mother, standing, drew in a sharp breath. The neighbors murmured, and for the first time, I watched Ren Yicheng understand. that I was not going to carry him anymore. At school the next morning, the rumor had
Outthrown me?
that is the nature of adolescent ecosystems. Truth travels dressed as entertainment, and entertainment always arrives first. My desk had been pulled slightly out of line with the others as if social contamination required visible quarantine. 2 girls from the art stream were whispering by the windows, pausing just long enough between sentences to look at, and sitting in my chair, one elbow propped on the desk as though she were posing for a low-budget perfume ad was Lynn Kiki. Pretty in the brittle, over-decorated way. Boys call mature and girls call exhausting. Uniform altered tighter at the academic scores so bad they had become almost conceptual. She floated around the edge of our grade because she was dating up or trying to, and because teachers often confuse. In my first life, she arrived later after the stairwell accusation had already attached to me. This time she came early because Ren Yi-jung must have panicked and told her enough to make her jealous, though not. She tapped one manicured nail on my desk and looked me over.
So you are the
Childhood sweetheart. I am the owner of Moo. A few people snickered,
KK.
smiled wider. Temper.
No wonder, Auntie.
Kiao is worried. I heard you left intimate.
Bold.
Ren Yicheng was in the room. Of course he was. He sat 2 rows over with his mouth set in that same expression of pained superiority, as if the mess happening around him were caused by excessive female feeling rather than his own weakness. I turned to him. Is she speaking for
You. He frowned.
Why are you escalating? Everyone's already tense. Just sit, just give up the seat. Just ignore the slander. Just make it smaller. Just let him stay clean while I absorb the dirt. I felt something cold and efficient click into place. KK, I said pleasantly before you embarrass yourself further, you should know that if I had ever wanted Ren. Also, if you are going to perform confidence, you might consider doing it without
Repeating a story that makes you sound.
like his second choice and me like someone. Her smile vanished. Ren Yicheng stood. Enough. No, I said.
Not enough.
Your mother accused me in front of your girlfriend is now repeating it at school and you're still standing there. So let us be efficient. Tell her the pink, he did too. The silence stretched long, enough for everyone nearby to understand. There was more truth in it than in. Then Keek shoved past me, grabbed her bag, and hissed, "You think this is over?" I bent to pick up my papers. I think I said, "It has not even become interesting yet." I moved to the back row. That same day, not because I was defeated, the seat beside Liu in the class. Delinquent, chronic sleeper, occasional, extortionist, and unofficial patron saint. No one wanted it, which meant no one would bother me there, and more importantly, no one would look closely enough to notice. For example, Ren Yicheng's study habits were worse than his reputation suggested. He relied heavily on last-minute pattern recognition and on me, historically, to stabilize anything detail-heavy.
Physics.
Corrections after mock exams. He called it studying together. In reality, I had been quietly patching his weaknesses for years because I mistook proximity for affection. For example, Keiki did not know how to stay invisible when angry. She stared too
Openly.
She liked theatrical timing. She copied soap opera girls without understanding that real manipulation requires boredom tolerance. And 4, Liao wanted peace more than justice. That made her soft pressure highly predictable. These were useful facts. Li Yuan lifted his head once while I spread my papers across the back desk. "You got a death wish?" he asked.
Not anymore.
He looked at me for 3 seconds, then went back to sleeping. At lunch, I skipped the canteen and used the library computer to print 3 things: my attendance record, my last, and the school's own code of conduct section on rumor-mongering and harassment. I put them in a clear folder. That afternoon, KK tried again. This time she did not sit in my chair. She waited until I went to the girls' restroom between classes. When I stepped into a stall, the latch snapped from. A bucket of cold water hit me from above. Before I even turned, the shock was total. Scalp, shoulders, bra straps, waistband. Someone outside laughed so hard she choked. "If you kneel and beg," Keki sang, "maybe we will let you out before evening study." In my previous life, I would have cried, scrubbed my uniform in the sink, lied to my parents about slipping in the rain, and then spent this time I stepped back, planted one foot against the lower panel of the stall door and kicked. The cheap lock gave on the. I came out soaked and furious and very, very calm. KK had barely enough time to widen her eyes before I grabbed the back of her neck and slammed her hands flat against the. Her friends froze. None of them had expected retaliation. Girls like them
Rarely do.
listen carefully, I said into. If you weaponize embarrassment against someone who has already died once, your planning needs to improve. Then Ren. It happened so fast the sting arrived. After the sound. One hard blow across the cheek. Not enough to knock me down, just enough to announce. Moral judgment in a language men always.
When he snapped, using the nickname.
He had not earned the right to speak in years. What are you doing, Keiki? I did not even touch her, she sobbed. She just attacked me. The vice dean, drawn by noise, arrived within a minute. Here is something I learned too late in my first life. Institutions do not react to pain. They react to choreography. The person who appears more coherent, more injured, more in step with expectation, usually gets the first version of truth. I did not lunge at Kike. I did not shout at Ren Yicheng for hitting me. I turned to the vice dean with water dripping off my sleeves, cheek blazing, and said in an even voice, "There are?" They entered after me. The stall was locked from outside.
Please pull the footage now.
The vice dean hesitated. Inside the security room we all watched. There is something exquisite about seeing bullies forced to sit still while they're Keiki entering with 3 girls. One of them carrying the bucket, another glancing back down the corridor, the lock, the laughter when the water poured, then the stall door exploding outward. No. Ambiguity. Keiki changed tactics at once. It was just a joke. The vice dean's face could have curdled paint. A joke, Ren? Yi Cheng tried to step in. Sir, everyone's. Maybe we can settle this internally. Because your girlfriend drenched a student and you struck another. The vice.
Yes, clearly a model for internal
Resolution. His sarcasm was beautiful. Kiki received a written demerit and a public disciplinary statement read at Monday assembly. Her 3 accomplices got warnings that would sit in their conduct files until graduation. Ren Yicheng escaped formal punishment for the slap only because I chose not to push. Then not out of mercy, but because timing a single recorded complaint later, attached to the right pattern, would cut deeper than a first burst of outrage. What is wrong with you? He demanded. You are acting like an enemy. I looked at him and thought, finally you notice.
You.
That was your first mistake. Hitting me?
Was your second?
He stared as if I had changed species. Perhaps I had. The school forum account appeared on Monday evening under the username wife of
Re-see.
That alone should have made me. Instead, it made me sit down very slowly at my desk and breathe through a wave of old nausea. The posts were a masterpiece of photos of Ren Yicheng sleeping over his desk in class, a close-up of his hand, holding a pen, his white shirt hanging, a shot of the nape of his neck from what was obviously their apartment living room. Underneath each, captions written in the tone of a delusional fiancé, my Yicheng looks so handsome today. He only studies. Those art trash girls need to stay away. Anyone who knew us even slightly could infer the intended target. Only a girl who lived close, who had access, who had long-standing attachment, could be so possessive. The comments began, wait, is not this that top student from class 3, didn't his mom already expose
Her? This is psychotic.
Honestly, kind of. My teacher called me to the office before first period. Inside were Ms. Liao, Mrs. Kiao, and Ren Yicheng, who had arranged his face into the expression of a patient victim. My parents were on their way from work, delayed by buses and the reality that poor people cannot teleport to defend their. Kiao slammed her palm on the desk.
You.
See, I told you all. That girl is obsessed with my son.
Ren.
Yicheng looked at me with complicated disappointment as if I had failed a.
You do not have to do this, he said.
If I ever made you misunderstand anything, I'm sorry, but this online behavior has. Even now he wanted to recast himself as unwilling object rather than central. Coward. I placed the clear folder on the. Then I said, call cybercrime. Everyone stopped.
Miss.
Liao blinked.
That may be.
Unnecessary. Why? The account is spreading defamatory material. The posts include private images taken without consent, and the school can contact the platform for IP tracing, or we can let the police do it. Mrs. Kiao jerked back in alarm. Police. Unless someone here would like to confess. First, Ren Yicheng's color dropped so fast I almost felt sorry for him. Almost, he knew exactly why police tracing would be a disaster, because it would expose not me, not some secret obsession, but his girlfriend's access to his home, and devices his mother's lies, and his own role in letting both women weaponize. He did what weak men always do under real pressure. He tried to make peace suddenly. Sound noble. Forget it, he said quickly. There is no need to involve the police. It is just childish.
Childish,
Repeated?
Interesting.
When it seemed convenient to blame me, it was serious enough to bring my name into the office. Now that tracing might produce facts, it becomes childish. My mother arrived just then, breathless and furious from climbing. She took one look at my face, my folder, the boy, the mother, and understood. Enough. No one, she said, will be sacrificing my daughter's reputation to preserve your sin's comfort. For the first time in two, that should have been enough to separate me from them. It was not. People who have fed on your silence resent your voice more. Kiao began monitoring my social media. If I posted that I was studying at the district library, she wanted to know why. If I shared a photograph of exam notes and
She somehow read hidden messages in
The teacup.
she even installed a camera in the corridor outside their apartment door and boasted about it to Auntie's son as if my mother tried to shield me by not repeating everything she heard. I learned anyway. One Friday night during supervised, supposedly sick. That was unusual. Mrs. Kiao treated flu, fever, stomach pain, and possible limb loss as excuses beneath exam. If he was missing, there was a reason. I took a photograph of the classroom from the back row, 38 students. One empty desk in the second line near the fan, and posted it with a harmless caption. Another late study session, everyone working hard. Then I turned my phone face down and finished a geometry set. 10 minutes later, I heard heels slapping the corridor tiles outside the classroom. Mrs. Kiao, she burst in without knocking and demanded, "Where is he?" No one answered. At first, because no one understood them. Then several heads turned toward the empty desk. I looked up as though mildly confused. He did not come to evening study. Her face changed from suspicion to something uglier. Not worry. Confirmation. I leaned back in my seat and returned to the theorem proof while three classmates stared openly
What did you do? Li Yuan muttered from.
beside me without lifting his head. Homework, I said. Later, I learned what? A small grove behind the athletics field. Hidden enough for kissing and stupid. Enough for teenagers to think no adults. Ren Yicheng and Lin Keiki there together.
Not.
talking.
Not studying. Very much not sick. Mrs. Kiao had discovered two things at once. That her son had lied to her. And that the girl she considered socially superior to me because of rumored wealth and style was not, in fact, an elite scholar from a prosperous family, but an academically failing art track girl from a household famous mainly for debt. For women like her, romantic betrayal hurts. Status betrayal enrages. The weekend after that, she arrived at our apartment with fruit in one hand and false cheer in the other, insisting our families eat together to put misunderstandings behind us.
My
Mother whispered, "This won't end well." It ended much better than that. At the dinner table, Mrs. Kiao performed humility like a seasoned actress. She ladled spare rib soup into my bowl, urged my father to take the better pieces of fish, praised my mock exam discipline, and kept calling me child in a tone so warm it nearly counted as a crime against memory. Then she reached the real point.
Keikis?
Family is quite decent, she said, dabbing her mouth. Her parents do business.
Not.
I hear she ranked second in the grade last term too. So I suppose young people naturally admire each other. Second in last term, second in the grade had been Zhou Mo, a boy with square glasses and a permanent expression of polite. Keiki had ranked somewhere below the academic horizon, which meant Ren Yicheng had lied to his mother again, inflating.
Interesting.
My father frowned. You seem very well informed all of a sudden. Mrs. Kiao smiled in that sharp little way of, I simply think people should know their
Place.
If a girl's grades are average and her background is average, she should not aim above herself. My mother's eyes narrowed. Whose place are we discussing? Not your daughter's future anymore, she said. Sweetly. Surely now she can stop. If she really cares about him, she should want what is best. A top university wife should at least be my father set down. Madam, he said, the only person here discussing my daughter like a bargaining chip is you. Speak once more about her like that in front of me and we leave with the plates. She opened her mouth, but I spoke first. There is a national physics competition next month, I said mildly, as if I were changing the topic for everyone's comfort. First prize can qualify students for a direct recommendation route. Ren Yicheng looked at me sharply. Mrs. Kiao blinked. If Keiki is really that strong, and Yicheng too, they should absolutely register. It would be a shame to waste talent.
My
Mother shot me a look that asked what game I was playing. I smiled into my soup.
what?
Keiki could not handle serious physics under timed pressure, and Mrs. Kiao, once given a ladder toward prestige, would force both of them onto it even if the rung sliced their palms open. By Monday morning, their names were on the competition list. The class laughed openly when they saw Keiki's. Ren Yicheng cornered. You told my mother on purpose.
I
Adjusted my backpack. Your mother believes your lies because she likes them. You enjoy this. Do not you? No, I said. Enjoyment would make this much simpler. The physics competition itself was never. I was good at physics, not born for it. My strength had always been persistence, the willingness to sit longer, with difficulty than the next person, to return to a failed derivation until the page gave up and answered honestly. In my previous life, that quality should have taken me to North Capital and beyond. Instead, it died with me in smoke. In this life, I had no intention of wasting it on vanity. Still, I wanted the exam. Not because I expected to win, but because pressure reveals the architecture of people. Keiki was placed 2 seats behind. She walked in wearing lip gloss and a confidence she had borrowed from ignorance. Ren Yicheng was in another. The first paper was hard enough to frighten ordinary excellence.
good.
Difficult tests are democratic in a way. I was midway through a mechanics problem when Kike raised her hand dramatically. Teacher, she said, voice clear enough. For half the room to hear, I think the girl in front of me is cheating. Several students looked up instantly. Of course. Nothing disrupts a high-stakes room like the promise of scandal. I closed. The teacher collected both our papers and took us out for review. In the monitoring room, 3 supervisors played the footage. It showed exactly what had happened. Me, writing continuously, checking the clock, turning pages, and never once looking. Keiki folded on the spot. Maybe I was mistaken. The chief supervisor's expression could have curdled paint.
This
You have interrupted a national exam.
we were.
Allowed back in, but I had lost 16 minutes. The old rage rose hot and sudden because this too had happened before, not in the same form, but in essence. Every time I neared something that belonged to my own ability, someone linked to Ren Yicheng found a way to drag me. So I made a decision in that chair under fluorescent lights. I stopped mourning.
Perfection.
I finished the paper with whatever time remained, not elegantly but efficiently. If the first prize vanished, so be it. My real target had never been a single certificate. It was freedom, admission, distance, a life large enough that their hallway, their gossip, their panic could never again define its ceiling. Outside, the Kiao was waiting with bottled drinks and fake concern. Keki only misunderstood. Because she was nervous, she said.
You.
Poor thing was so upset she probably ruined her own exam. One of my classmates, bless her vicious honesty. Auntie, your poor thing cost Wen Yi. Over 15 minutes? Mrs. Kiao's smile thinned. I looked at her, then at KK, who was pretending not to hear, and said, Don't worry. I can still reach my goal without. The real question is whether they can reach theirs with so many accidents. Kiki's face went rigid. Mrs. Kiao heard. I located it for her through Kike's brother. His name was Lin Qiang, 28 years. Old and too lazy for honest work, but energetic enough when harassing women near. Months earlier, he had cornered my friend Su Nian and refused to leave until she gave him a contact. She handed him a disconnected number and came to me afterwards so furious she cried, Good friends are libraries. They remember. That night, I borrowed an unregistered SIM card from Li Yuan, who did not ask why, merely demanded half my fried tofu. Your sister is dating above her weight. Boy from good family. Rich mother. Only. Sen. If you want proper bride price later. Then I sent him Ren Yicheng's address. It took less than 24 hours. By Sunday afternoon, the entire building heard. The Lins arrived in a pack, brother first, then mother, then a father who had perfected the art of looking aggrieved. They banged on the Kiao's door so hard that metal grill shook. Mrs. Kiao opened it halfway and got an instant education in. Your son has ruined my daughter, Mrs. Lin screamed. Either we discuss
Engagement or you pay compensation.
Mrs. Kiao shrieked back that her son had ruined nothing, and her house certainly was not a charity office for other people's. Keiki, dragged there against her will, stood on the landing crying and insisting. There had been no promise, no pregnancy, which given the circumstances was unintentionally profound. The police came. Eventually, by then the hallway smelled of sweat, rage, and cheap mandarins crushed underfoot. Someone from the 5th floor, Chow, ended up paying 2,000 to make the Lins leave. Then she slapped Cake so hard her lip split. Ren Yicheng watched. That, more than anything, was why I could finally see him clearly. Cruel boys are easy to hate. Cowardly ones are harder because part of you keeps hoping the good in them is simply delayed. But weakness is not neutral when it consistently chooses the side of harm. That evening, he came to my apartment door. How can you be so vicious? I almost laughed. How can you ask that with your face? I said. Your mother destroyed your girlfriend poured water on me and framed me in an exam. You watched both and found energy only when your own comfort was threatened. He looked at me as if my refusal to remain. I leaned against the doorframe and said, the truest thing I had ever said to him. I do not love you. I do not want you. If there is any ghost left between us, it is gratitude I should never have owed in the first place. He went white. Good. As the university entrance exam approached, Mrs. Kiao tightened her grip on Ren Yicheng until it became almost. She stopped attending morning square dancing. She stationed herself outside his classroom during self-study as if he might climb out the window and marry ruin if she brought thermoses of soup and boiled eggs and recited score targets like
Prayer.
pressure did what it always does. His mock exam ranking slipped from 9th to 32, then to 55. Mine rose to 1st in the grade. Teachers began. Neighbors who once watched me with curiosity now did that new thing communities do when they sense upward. My mother smiled politely through it. My father bought me dumplings from the expensive stall without checking but now our poverty felt directional, rather than enclosing. Then Mrs. Kiao did something so absurd it almost seemed. She approached my mother after the pre-exam parent briefing and suggested that if I would guide Ren Yicheng, she might consider, later, allowing a
Future between us.
allowing. My mother, who had endured this woman's harassment for years with a discipline that now embarrassed us both, looked at her for a long second and said, you talk about my daughter as if she were an extra class your son can subscribe to. If he needs saving, hire a tutor. If he needs a wife, teach him to become someone worth marrying. Mrs. Kiao flushed dark. My son will still make North Capital. Then he can do it on his own feet.
I
Heard the whole thing from around the. He may not choose you. His mother already has plans. Sometimes, you do not need to push people into betrayal. You only need to show them the. On exam day, I watched Kiki arrive near the school gates in a white dress and cardigan, all innocence and poison. Mrs. Kiao, exhausted and swollen-eyed, went to buy Ren Yicheng water after he claimed he was thirsty. The moment she disappeared into the kiosk line, Cake rushed forward, kissed him once, and slipped her hand into the side. From where I stood, I could not see the exact movement. I did not need to. In the exam room, 2 seats apart, I watched him. No pens, no eraser, nothing. The invigilator offered spare stationery. He refused and sat there with his hands flat on the desk, staring at the blank answer sheet as if the world had become. He submitted Chinese language nearly blank. By the time the next paper began, his future at North Capital was already. When the scores came out, mine were masked. That small gray notification on the district portal, result withheld for provincial ranking review, made my mother. My father sat down on the floor beside the router because his knees gave out. I stood between them with my login slip in one hand and the taste of 2 lifetimes in my mouth. In the courtyard outside the school, Students shouted, laughed, cursed, and dialed relatives all at once. Some cried, some from both. Someone near the notice board called out Ren Yicheng's total. 503. The number dropped into not terrible by ordinary standards, fatal by his. Mother's. I turned just in time to see Mrs.
Kiao push through the crowd, ask what he
got, and then stare at the screen as if it had personally betrayed her. A teacher nearby, trying to be kind and only making it worse, murmured that. Perhaps a second-tier provincial. She folded slowly to the ground,
Not.
theatrically this time, simply gone in the
Knees.
Around her, people moved in that. No one knew whether to help or avoid.
Ren.
Yicheng stood beside her with his face emptied out. Keiki was nowhere in sight.
I.
Some sharp, sweet note. Instead, I felt mostly quiet. My parents came to either side of me. My mother squeezed my father said very softly, "Let us go." Home.
Home.
In my previous life, I never made it there after the score release. We had celebrated too early bought braised chicken, laughed over what dormitory life might be like. That same. This time we went home before sunset, carrying cheap flowers from the street. Vendor, because my mother said every happy. We had just finished dinner when someone,
Knocked.
Mrs. Kiao, stood outside holding fruit packaged, sweets, and the expression of a woman whose logic had finally mutated into. Ren Yicheng stood behind her, thin and mute as ever. I came to discuss the
Children, she said.
My mother laughed in. What followed was so grotesque I almost admired its consistency. Mrs. Kiao proposed in all seriousness that, since I clearly cared for Ren Yicheng and had the grades to spare, I might delay, stay local, help him prepare properly, and solidify the understanding between us. For marriage later, she even used the phrase a top scholar should support her man. My father threw the fruit back onto the landing. I stepped forward before either parent could waste more fury and said, there was never any understanding. There was only your imagination and his silence. Then I looked at Ren Yicheng one last time. If you had apologized once when it mattered, I said, perhaps I would remember you with pity. But all you ever wanted was someone else to carry the consequences of loving you badly. I shut the door in their faces. We moved quietly, efficiently, and with the ruthlessness of people who had learned what familiarity can cost. New district. My parents both received transfers after. The score scandal drew just enough attention for their supervisors too. My provincial ranking came in at 7th. North Capital admitted me without drama. My mother framed the letter even before we traveled that August, our first real trip ever. Suzhou canals, Hangzhou rain. Then further north were the mountains. My father took too many photographs of road signs. My mother bought tea she could not afford because she said memory should. I watched them from train windows and hotel lobbies and finally understood how much of adulthood is simply staying alive. At North Capital University, the air itself felt larger. Libraries open past midnight. Students arguing economics on, laboratories humming like restrained weather. Girls from cities I had only ever seen on exam paper reading passages, speaking 3 languages badly and 1 brilliantly. For a week I walked the campus half in awe, half in fury that a place like this had once been close enough to smell, and I studied mathematics and data systems because numbers, unlike gossip, remain loyal to structure. I worked part-time in the analytics lab, and later under a professor who believed students should be treated like. I slept too little, laughed more, and learned that being admired for the right reasons is quieter than being noticed for. News from the old neighborhood reached me sporadically through classmates and one nosy former neighbor who found my mother.
Ren Yicheng repeated his final year.
Then repeated parts of it again through alternative certification because his Kiao's supervision turned from discipline into prison. Keiki vanished for a while, resurfaced. Pregnant, claimed the child was his, lost. The pregnancy after a staircase fight with Kiao, and then attached herself to that. Household like a lawsuit with lipstick. They all lived together for a time in some arrangement so poisonous the neighbors stopped trying to distinguish screaming. When I heard that, I closed the message and went back to my problem set. Revenge, I had learned, is overrated if you have to. Better to build a life so absorbing that the wreckage behind you becomes weather instead of landscape. Still, the past has. In my 3rd year, when I was already interning with a research group on behavioral risk modeling, a youth education foundation invited me back to speak at a district scholarship event for high-performing students from. My mother wanted me to decline. My father said going back on my own terms might be the last exam that mattered. He was right. The event took place in the municipal auditorium 10 kilometers from our old
Neighborhood.
I wore a navy suit from a clearance rack, tailored twice, and a pair of low heels I could actually stand in. The students in the audience looked exactly as I must once have looked: tired, alert, suspicious of praise, and I spoke about study systems, yes, and exam strategy, and how to construct routines when your environment does not naturally. But I also said something no one had ever said to me at 17. Not every person who hinders you is stronger than you. Some are simply older, louder, or more practiced at making you feel guilty for protecting yourself. Learn the difference early. Afterward, a line formed for questions. Halfway through it, I saw Ren Yicheng. He had aged badly. The bones of his face were still handsome, but stress had carved him downward. He wore a second-rate university jacket and held himself like someone expecting correction from every doorway. For a second, I saw the boy by the reservoir again, then the boy in the stairwell, then the boy who watched his. Can we talk? He asked. I considered leaving him there in the corridor under the scholarship banners. Instead, I said, 1 minute. We stood beside a bulletin board covered in photos of prize recipients. He looked at my badge at the university, seal at the line of students still waiting behind me. I'm sorry, he said. There are apologies so late they sound less like remorse and more like a person. Discovering failure has no refund policy. For all of it, he said finally. For my mother, for not speaking. For the fire, I cut him off. The fire was your mother's. Your silence was yours. He swallowed. No, I said. You know it now. Knowing it then would have changed. I did love you once, I told him, because truth, when unnecessary, can still be clarifying. Or rather, I loved the version of you that only existed when I was useful and hopeful at the same time. She died before. You did not value her enough when she was
Alive.
The minute was over. I turned back toward the waiting students. Behind me, I heard him whisper my name. Once, not because he expected me to answer, but because some habits outlive. By 25, I had built what the newspapers like to call an impressive career, and what my parents more accurately, my doctoral work turned into a research consultancy. The consultancy turned into a risk intelligence firm specializing in educational access, fraud mapping, and predictive harm modeling for public systems that preferred prevention only when it came with clean graphs. I hired people smarter than me whenever possible. I slept with my phone on silent and 3 backup chargers within reach. I bought my parents a 2-bedroom apartment with south light and a kitchen. My mother still claims is too big. I also funded a legal aid scholarship for girls in provincial schools facing defamation, coercion, or family. Not because I believed I could save all of
Them.
because one accusation at the wrong age can reroute an entire life. On the 10th anniversary of my mask score, the university invited me to deliver the keynote at their freshmen. I stood at the podium in the same institution I once entered with secondhand luggage and a private vow never to be, and I looked out at thousands of faces lit by stage wash and anticipation. The speech they wanted was inspirational. I gave them something better. I told them discipline matters. I told them mentors. I told them fatigue can masquerade as failure and that many brilliant students do not lack intelligence. They lack. I told them to learn money early, documentation earlier, and the difference between loyalty and extraction before. Then I told them this: people will try to define you through convenience, through rumor, debt, gratitude, class, family expectation, or the version of you that made their lives easier. You are not required to remain understandable to those who benefited from your silence. The hall went so quiet. Afterward, a girl in the front row cried and said she thought she was a bad daughter because she wanted to leave home. I told her wanting a future is not a betrayal. A boy with grease under his fingernails asked whether ambition makes. I told him only if they confuse scarcity with morality. On the way out, my mother squeezed my hand.
You sound like someone.
I thought about it.
No, I answered.
I sound like someone who finally decided survival should make a profit.
She
Laughed so hard she had to take off her